Did you know that seniors lose an estimated $3 billion every year to financial scams? And the most insidious of those scams don't start with a threat. They start with a whisper. A quiet suggestion that you're not remembering things correctly, that you're confused, that you're the one who's making the mistake, not them. It's a poison that rots your confidence from the inside out, and it has a name: gaslighting. It's a term you hear everywhere now, thrown around on social media and cable news until it's almost lost its meaning. But I want to talk about where it came from, because understanding the original sickness helps you spot the symptoms today. It all started with a play, of all things, back in 1938. Gaslight. The story is simple and brutal. A husband, Jack, wants to drive his wife, Bella, insane to get his hands on her inheritance. He does it by orchestrating tiny, almost unnoticeable changes in their home. He dims the gas-powered lights, and when she comments on it, he tells her she's imagining it. He hides a painting, then convinces her that she lost it. He makes her hear footsteps in the empty attic. He isolates her, cutting her off from anyone who might confirm her reality, until her entire world is filtered through him. And she begins to believe it. She starts to think she is, in fact, going mad. This reminds me of a case I consulted on years back. A man named Silas, who was helping his elderly mother, Margaret, manage her finances after her husband passed. On the surface, he was the perfect son, but Margaret's friends started calling us. They said she was becoming withdrawn, confused, and paranoid. When we sat down with her, she told us these strange stories. Money would vanish from her account, and Silas would produce bank statements, which we later found were forged, showing she'd spent it on lavish things she had no memory of buying. He'd move her jewelry, then help her find it, tutting about her forgetfulness. He even changed the ringer on her phone and told her she was imagining the calls she was missing from her friends, further isolating her. He was dimming the lights in her life, one by one, making her doubt her own mind so he could bleed her dry. He wasn't a monster in a play, he was her son. He used the trust she had in him as his primary weapon. The psychological principle at play here is deceptively simple. It's about cognitive dissonance. The human brain craves consistency. When your own perception, the lights are dimming, clashes with the confident assertion of someone you trust, no, they re-not, you're just tired. It creates a painful mental friction. To resolve that friction, you have to discard one of the beliefs, and if your confidence has already been eroded, it's much easier to discard your own perception than it is to believe a loved one is a liar. It's a slow-motion attack on the very foundation of your reality. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and walked away feeling a strange sense of confusion, doubting your own memory of what was said? Have you ever been told your reaction to something was crazy or over the top when it felt perfectly reasonable to you? That's the seed. That's the beginning. And it's a seed that, once planted, can grow in the dark until it chokes out everything else. That one-on-one manipulation, that intimate form of cruelty, is the purest form of gaslighting. But the truly dangerous thing is how that tactic metastasized. It escaped the home and infected our institutions. Corporations, governments, police departments, any large, powerful entity learned that it could do the same thing to the public that a manipulator does to a single person. It's no longer just about making one person doubt their reality. It's about making an entire community, or even a country, doubt what's right in front of their eyes. It's the difference between a back-alley mugging and organized crime. One is personal and vicious, the other is systemic and inescapable. And the goal is the same: to maintain control by warping the truth until the victims blame themselves. I was brought in to review the fallout from a chemical spill in a small town called Hickory Creek. A manufacturing plant had been leaking a solvent into the groundwater for years. People started getting sick, strange cancers, neurological problems in children. The townspeople knew something was wrong. They could taste it in the water. They could see the sickness in their neighbors. They complained, they organized, they protested. But the corporation didn't just deny it. They went on the offensive. They hired a high-powered PR firm that launched a campaign to discredit the town. They published their own scientific studies with cherry-picked data, concluding the water was perfectly safe. They sent representatives to town hall meetings who would calmly and authoritatively call the residents' fears unfounded mass hysteria. They'd say things like, "We understand you're concerned, but the data, the real facts, don't support your anecdotal experiences." They were telling an entire town that their collective reality was wrong. The sickness they were seeing with their own eyes was just a coincidence. The metallic taste in the water was their imagination. The company, with its army of lawyers and scientists in lab coats, was the sole arbiter of truth. And it was brutally effective. Neighbors started arguing with each other. People who were sick were accused of being attention-seeking or trying to get a payout. The corporation had successfully turned the town against itself, all by dimming the lights and telling them it was all in their heads. The psychological mechanism here is the authority principle. We are socially conditioned to trust official-looking documents, people in suits, and established institutions. When a corporation or a government body presents a united, confident front, it creates a powerful psychological barrier. For an ordinary person, to challenge that is to position yourself as an outlier, a crank, a conspiracy theorist. The institution leverages its perceived authority to make you feel isolated and foolish. Your personal experience, no matter how real, feels insignificant and subjective compared to their objective data. It happens in smaller ways every day. A boss denies ever promising you a raise, making you question your own professional judgment. A doctor dismisses your legitimate symptoms as just stress or being all in your head, making you feel like a hypochondriac. The system is designed to protect itself, and one of its primary tools is to make anyone who questions it doubt their own sanity. Have you ever been in a situation where challenging the official story made you the bad guy? Where you knew something was wrong, but the sheer effort of fighting the accepted narrative was so exhausting that it was easier to just stay quiet? That's the system working as intended. Once institutions learned to gaslight, they needed a megaphone. They found it in the 24-hour news cycle and the political machinery that feeds it. It used to be that the media's job, at least ostensibly, was to present a shared set of facts, a baseline reality that we could all agree on, even if we disagreed about what to do about it. But that changed. The business model shifted from information to engagement, and nothing is more engaging than conflict. Nothing keeps people glued to a screen like the feeling that their entire worldview is under attack. So the media stopped reporting on one reality and started manufacturing competing ones. They learned to frame a narrative so powerfully that the facts themselves became secondary. I worked on a case that was an absolute circus. A man named Leo Vance accused of a very public, very brutal fraud. The evidence was complex, a mountain of financial documents that took months to sort through. But the public didn't see that. They saw what the cable news channels showed them. On one channel, Vance was a sociopath, a predator in a $1,000 suit. They'd play ominous music over his photo, interview angry victims, and bring on experts who spoke about him in the most damning terms possible. They framed him as a symptom of corporate greed, a cancer on society. On the other channel, he was a patriot, an innovator being persecuted by a corrupt government. They'd show pictures of him with his family, interview loyal employees who swore by his character, and bring on different experts who claimed he was a victim of bureaucratic overreach. By the time the case went to trial, it was almost impossible to find 12 people who hadn't already made up their minds. Both sides had been so thoroughly gaslit by their preferred news source that they couldn't see the other side's perspective as anything other than delusion or malice. The prosecution's evidence was seen as a witch hunt by half the jury pool. The defense's arguments were seen as despicable lies by the other half. The truth, buried under all that noise, didn't stand a chance. We weren't arguing facts anymore, we were fighting against two completely separate, media-created realities. This is a masterclass in narrative framing. It's a psychological tactic where the presentation of information influences how it's interpreted. By selecting specific words, images, and experts, a news outlet can frame the same event as either a heroic triumph or a catastrophic failure. Think about it. You see video of a protest. One headline reads, "Citizens peacefully assemble to demand change." Another reads, "Violent mob shuts down city." It's the same footage, but the frame tells you how to feel about it. It gives you the conclusion before you've even had a chance to look at the evidence. This then triggers our own confirmation bias. We instinctively seek out the frame that aligns with what we already believe. It feels good. It feels validating. And the gaslighting comes in when we're faced with the other frame. We don't think, "Oh, that's an interesting different perspective." We think, "How can they be so blind? Are they stupid or are they evil?" The news isn't just telling you you're right. It's telling you that anyone who disagrees with you has lost touch with reality. Have you ever argued with someone about a political event and felt like you were speaking different languages? Do you find yourself getting your news from the same one or two sources because the others just seem outrageously biased and wrong? That's the echo chamber, and it's the most effective gaslighting tool ever invented. Now, I'm going to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. Everything we've been discussing, this subtle art of dismantling a person as reality, isn't just a weapon used by con men, abusive spouses, and corrupt institutions. In the right hands, and under very strict ethical guidelines, it's a tool I have used myself. Because in an interrogation room, you are not there to have a polite conversation. You are there to find the truth, and sometimes the truth is buried under a fortress of lies. Your job is to take that fortress apart, brick by brick, until the person inside has nowhere left to hide. You don't do it with a sledgehammer. You do it by making them doubt the very blueprints of the reality they've constructed for themselves. We brought in a suspect once, a brilliant accountant named Julian Croft, accused of orchestrating a massive pension fund fraud. He was smarter than all of us in the room, and he knew it. He walked in with an airtight alibi, a calm demeanor, and an answer for everything. Yelling at him would be useless. Presenting him with our primary evidence would just allow him to weave it into his story. So we didn't. We started talking about the weather on the day of the key transaction. We asked him what he had for lunch. We asked him what time he left for the gym. For hours we talked about utterly mundane things, and every time he gave us a detail, we would gently, calmly introduce a small, undeniable fact that contradicted it. He said he had a sandwich from his usual deli. We could produce a credit card statement showing he, D, actually paid for a salad at a cafe across town. He'd say, "Oh, right, it was the salad." He'd say he drove his sedan. We'd show him a security photo of his SUV leaving his garage. "Ah, yes, I took the wife's car that day. Forgot about that." Each one was a tiny, insignificant lie he was forced to abandon. None of them proved he committed the fraud, but each correction cost him mental energy. We were deliberately inducing cognitive fatigue. A lie is a heavy thing to carry. It requires constant maintenance. The truth weighs nothing. For 6 hours, we made him carry the weight of 1,000 tiny lies. We didn't raise our voices. We just kept handing him little pieces of his own reality that did not fit the story he was telling, forcing his brain to constantly rewrite the narrative. By the end, he was exhausted. The airtight alibi he had walked in with now felt like a distant memory, full of holes he could no longer patch. The mental fortress was rubble. And in the silence, when he had no energy left to lie, the truth came out. This is the razor's edge. In the hands of a trained investigator with a solid case, it's a method for exposing a sophisticated criminal. But in the hands of an untrained or unethical officer, it's how you get false confessions from innocent people. It's a dangerous technique that should be handled with extreme caution, because it works. It preys on the brain's need for a consistent narrative. When that consistency is systematically broken, the mind will seek the path of least resistance. Often, that path is the truth. But sometimes it's whatever story the interrogator is offering. It raises a difficult question, doesn't it? When is it acceptable to manipulate someone's perception of reality for a greater good? And who gets to decide what the greater good is? The interrogation room I described is a controlled environment. It's a sealed box where reality can be carefully deconstructed. What we have now, with social media, is that same principle unleashed in a global, chaotic, uncontrolled feedback loop. It's as if someone took the core techniques of psychological manipulation and built a machine to automate them and deploy them on a planetary scale. Every weakness of the human mind, our need for validation, our tribal instincts, our confirmation bias, is now the product that is being sold. The Internet didn't invent gaslighting, but it perfected its delivery system. It weaponized it. We had what should have been an open and shut assault case. A man was attacked in a parking lot. We had witnesses, we had security footage, it was clear. But someone leaked a 10-second clip of the footage, edited to show only the moment where the victim shoved his attacker away right before the assault. The clip was posted online with the caption, "Man attacks innocent bystander." It went viral. Within hours, a digital mob had formed. These weren't investigators. They were just people with keyboards, convinced they were righteous detectives. They identified the victim, posted his home address online, a practice they call doxing. They found his employer and flooded them with calls until he was fired. They sent death threats to his family. The actual witnesses were so terrified of the online mob that they recanted their statements. The narrative was no longer in our hands. The truth was irrelevant. The 10-second clip, shared 1 million times, became more real than the full 30-minute video of the unprovoked assault. The mob had created their own reality, and they were willing to destroy a man's life to defend it. We were no longer investigating a crime, we were fighting a phantom army of anonymous accusers, each one acting as judge, jury, and executioner. This is the terrifying power of social proof on a massive scale. It's a psychological phenomenon where people assume the actions of others reflect the correct behavior for a given situation. If one person tells you a lie, you might question it. If 1,000 people on your screen are screaming that lie, your brain starts to think it must be the truth. This is amplified by the illusory truth effect. The more you hear something, the more you believe it. Social media algorithms are designed for this. They don't show you what's true, they show you what will keep you engaged. And what keeps you engaged is seeing your own beliefs echoed back to you over and over again. A lie, seen 100 times in your feed, starts to feel familiar, comfortable, true. Have you ever seen a friend or relative share a story that you knew was completely fabricated, yet they were utterly convinced of its authenticity? Trying to reason with them is like trying to tell someone the sky isn't blue. Their reality has been reinforced by thousands of likes, shares, and comments. You, with your one dissenting voice, sound like the crazy one. You are, in effect, trying to gaslight them with the truth. Does the anonymity of the screen strip away our empathy? Or does it just give us permission to act on the worst parts of our nature that were there all along? So, where does this all lead? We've journeyed from a single dimmed gas lamp in a Victorian play to a global network of digital manipulation. We've seen how this poison seeps from a personal relationship into our institutions, our media, and our politics. What is the cumulative effect of all this? The real target of systemic gaslighting isn't just your confidence or your sanity. It's the single most important pillar of a functioning society: shared reality. For us to coexist, to solve problems, to have a justice system, we have to be operating from the same basic set of facts. We need to agree that the sky is blue, that gravity is real, and that evidence matters. Mass gaslighting is a deliberate attack on that consensus. It's an attempt to shatter society into 1,000 little tribes, each with its own non-negotiable truth, so that we can be more easily controlled. The last time I consulted on jury selection for a major trial, I saw this firsthand. It used to be that the process, what we call voir dire, was about weeding out individual biases. You'd ask a potential juror if they could be impartial, and you'd take their answer at face value unless you had a strong reason not to. Now, it's a grim, almost hopeless exercise. We weren't just screening for bias, we were screening for which version of reality the person lived in. We'd ask simple, fact-based questions about the events surrounding the case, and the answers were staggering. People sitting right next to each other would describe the same event in terms that were not just different, but fundamentally incompatible. One person's riot was another's protest. One person's whistleblower was another's traitor. It became clear that many of them couldn't be impartial because they had been so thoroughly conditioned by their chosen media bubble that they were incapable of seeing the facts any other way. Their reality had been prepackaged for them. They weren't lying, they genuinely believed their version of the world was the only true one. How do you build a jury from that? How can a system of justice function when the very concept of objective truth is seen as a partisan opinion? This is the societal cost. We lose the ability to trust not just institutions, but each other. Without a shared reality, there is no common ground. Without common ground, there's no debate, no compromise, no progress. There is only conflict. Think about the last holiday dinner you had where a contentious topic came up. Did it feel like a discussion, or did it feel like people were shouting at each other from two different planets? That's the societal sickness in miniature. That feeling of frustration, of not even being able to agree on the basic premise of the conversation, is the end goal of mass gaslighting. It's a society suffering from collective cognitive dissonance. It creates a constant, low-level paranoia. If we can't trust our neighbors to see the same world we see, then our neighbors become a potential threat. And a society of suspicious, isolated individuals is a society that is easy to manage, easy to sell to, and easy to rule. Do you feel more divided from your fellow citizens now than ever before? When you see someone with a bumper sticker you disagree with, is your first instinct curiosity or contempt? The answer tells you how well the machine is working. After all of this, it would be easy to feel helpless. It's a bleak picture, a world where your own mind can be turned into a prison, where institutions and algorithms are constantly working to warp your perception of reality. But I didn't spend decades staring into the abyss to tell you that the abyss is staring back. I'm here to tell you that every lock has a key. The most sophisticated psychological manipulation in the world is powerless if you refuse to surrender the one thing that is truly yours, your own perception. Reclaiming your sanity in a world gone mad is not a passive act. It is a decision. It is a discipline. Let me tell you about a woman named Eleanor. She was the victim of a long con, a romantic fraud artist who had completely taken over her life. He used every trick we've discussed. He isolated her from her friends, controlled her finances, and constantly made her feel forgetful, irrational, and unstable. She was deep in the fog. But one day, a tiny flicker of her old self, the sharp woman she used to be, sparked to life. She bought a simple notebook and a pen, and after every confusing conversation, every strange, unsettling event, she would go to her room and write down exactly what happened. Word for word, as best she could remember. She documented the dates, the times, the promises made, the insults hurled. That journal became her anchor. When he said, "I never said that, you're imagining things," she could open her book and see the words written in her own hand. It was an external, undeniable record of her reality. The gaslight couldn't work in the face of the written word. His manipulations, which felt so powerful and confusing in the moment, looked cheap and obvious on the page. That simple $5 notebook gave her the strength to see the truth, and that truth gave her the strength to call us. That is the first and most powerful tool you have. Document your reality. If you feel like you're in a fog, start writing. Keep a journal. Save the emails. Screenshot the text messages. Create a private, physical record that cannot be argued away. Second, trust your gut. That feeling of confusion, of unease, of your stomach twisting into a knot when someone is talking to you. That is not a sign of your weakness. That is a sign of your strength. It is your mind's alarm system telling you that something is wrong. Don't let anyone convince you that alarm is a malfunction. Third, find an anchor. Gaslighting works best in isolation. Cultivate 1 or 2 relationships with people you trust implicitly, people who have known you for years. When you feel yourself losing your footing, call them. Say the words, "I need a reality check. Here's what's happening. Am I going crazy?" A true friend will help you find solid ground. This is the conscious practice of reality testing. It's the simple act of checking your perceptions against an external, reliable source. A manipulator wants to be your sole source of truth. Your journal, your gut, your trusted friend. These are competing sources of truth. They break the monopoly. This applies to the media you consume as well. Deliberately read or watch something from a perspective you disagree with, not to be persuaded, but simply to see the frame they are using. Understand their reality, and you will be less trapped by your own. What is one small step you can take today to begin documenting your own reality? Who is the one person in your life you can count on to be your anchor? Answering those questions is the beginning of your freedom. The world may be full of manipulators trying to dim the lights, but they cannot succeed unless you let them. Hold on to your own truth. It's the most valuable thing you will ever own.